Have a happy and safe holiday.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
One for the president, one against. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The House sides with President Trump and votes to increase stimulus checks to $2,000.
On this vote, the yeas are 275. The nays are 134.
But House lawmakers also voted against the president to override his veto of the defense spending and policy bill.
On this vote, the yeas are 322. The nays are 87.
Both measures move on to the Senate, where the fate of at least one of them is in question. The one for COVID relief.
Only 44 Republicans supported the president's plan. Many worried about the price tag. This proposal costs $463 billion, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation. One Republican told me their anger is incandescent at the president tonight.
Fox's Chad Pergram. The increase on COVID relief may not even make it to the floor in the Senate, while the override on the defense bill is likely to get a Senate vote Wednesday. California is expected to extend its strict stay-at-home orders Tuesday for areas where hospitals are running out of ICU beds. This comes ahead of what's likely to be a post-holiday COVID surge.
With more virus cases expected to come in the next few weeks after Christmas and New Year's travelers return home.
Fox's Jeff Manasso. The coronavirus has killed more than 24,000 people in California and nearly 335,000 nationwide. And a record day on Wall Street all around, with the three major benchmark indexes closing at record highs after President Trump signed the spending bill this weekend, averting a government shutdown. The Dow rose 204 points to close at 30,403. The NASDAQ posting its 55th record close of the year. America's listening to Fox News.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
As we usher in the holiday season, we want to express our gratitude and appreciation for the lessons that have allowed us to navigate an unprecedented year. We recognize the impact the pandemic has brought to the world and express our condolences to those who have suffered. We are focused on family and what matters most as a community. Our team at Security Title is proud of the work we do. May this holiday season bring your family renewed hope. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from Security Title.
One big theory is flying around about why Anthony Warner blew up an RV in Nashville Christmas morning.
A number of reports traced back to an unnamed investigator who told ABC News that they're looking strongly into the possibility that the motive for the attack was something called 5G paranoia, that Anthony Quinn Warner was paranoid that the technology was being used to spy on people. 5G paranoia has manifested in a number of forms. Some theories say it causes cancer, spreads coronavirus, or has resulted in entire flocks of birds dying. None of these theories have ever vetted or proven true.
Fox's Mike Tobin. Investigators say the facts for now are that Warner's father worked for AT&T and the RV exploded in front of an AT&T building. An attorney for the Army Special Forces sergeant arrested for Saturday's deadly shooting at a bowling alley in Illinois says the sergeant suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. Rockford Police Chief Dan O'Shea tells reporters,
"We believe this is a completely random act, and there is no prior meeting or any kind of relationship between the suspect and any of the victims."
Police arrested 37-year-old Duke Webb on 3 counts of murder and 3 of attempted murder. The Army says he was on leave at the time of the shooting. And the last Monday Night Football of the season turns into a one-sided game.
It was all Allen and Diggs in a Buffalo Bills blowout.
And it is, that's Stephon Diggs.
call courtesy of ESPN. Josh Allen finding Stephon Diggs for their third touchdown connection of the night, helping Allen surpass Hall of Famer Jim Kelly for the most TD passes by a Bills QB in a single season with 34. Diggs would also break the franchise's single-season receiving yards record as the Bills clobber the New England Patriots 38-9. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Buying a house, apartment, or condo, selling your home or property, or maybe you're renting a house, apartment, or condo on Guam. Whatever your real estate needs are, you can count on the professionals at Horizon Properties to take care of you. Call Horizon Properties at 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonproperties.com or follow them on Facebook at Horizon Properties Guam. Maria Miller and the professionals at Horizon Properties. All you need to know in real estate.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations. Check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play or go to thepoint.gu.
Contact tracing is key to containing COVID-19. That's why we're introducing the Guam COVID Alert app. According to Oxford University, for every 100 to 200 downloads of this app, 100 infections can be prevented and 1 life can be saved. Help save a life. Go to guamcovidalert.guam.gov or download the app from the App Store or Google Play now. Add your phone to the COVID fight. Help Guam stop COVID-19.
They're back. Any footlong is a $5 footlong when you buy one at regular price. At participating locations, Subway, eat fresh.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Security Title, providing solutions for complex real estate transactions. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. Have I ever said that before, Tony? I mean, excuse me.
You
Jose?
have called me Tony before.
Yes, I have, yeah.
You've said that many times, but I just realized, isn't this the theme song to Peter Gunn?
Exactly. Exactly,
Cool.
And that's the reason it was chosen.
Ah.
The theme from Peter Gunn.
I got some Brights in here.
Uh-huh.
They show up every now and then.
There you go. Yeah, the theme from Peter Gunn announcing the reading of the part of the Constitution that talks about the right to carry a gun. Doesn't get any better than that, Jose.
I concur.
All right, so let's go now straight to Demi Klutney. Yeah, so what else is new? The Daily News has got an editorial not about Guam or anything local. It's by Cindy L. Olson, a guest columnist, and she's a disinformation expert and former CIA analyst, and she's the vice president of analysis at Alethea Group, and she doesn't have anything that I'm very interested in, so we'll just put her back in the folder. Turning then to the Post, and the Post says, the process to provide $600 in federal aid to Guam residents must be done quickly. Now, I'd have never thought of that in a million years. If I had been the one to write this editorial, it probably would have read, no sense rushing into this idea of spreading around $600 checks. Let's take our time. Now that the country's $900 billion economic relief package has become law, The wait for the $600 direct financial aid for Guam residents to show up in the mail begins. Stateside are expected to receive their money, $600 per adult and $600 per dependent child under 17, as soon as this week or next week. Now, I don't think they quite understand what they're saying when they say statesiders.
No.
Perhaps they mean people living in the 50 states.
There you go.
Yeah. But a little lesson in nomenclature here. If you were to examine the use of the word statesider has a racial connotation. A statesider is a paleface. I am a statesider.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, so when I first got here over 50 years ago, there were basically three races: Guamanians, Filipinos, and statessiders. You fit into one of those three groups, yeah. Okay, well, let's say that by statesiders, what the editorial means is folks living in the 50 states. They expect to get their $600 as soon as this week or next. Their process is much quicker because the U.S. Treasury Department can simply crank out the checks and put them in the mail. On Guam, the process has been more lengthy. Based on the first pandemic relief package, the government of Guam had to submit a plan that was acceptable to the U.S. Treasury, and then Guam waited for the federal money to show up in a GovGuam bank account. The local government also had to come up with a list of recipients based on filers of 2018 or 2019 tax returns. The process was even longer for people who didn't have income and didn't file tax returns. With GovGuam's experience in the first pandemic relief package, we looked to our local government to get the processing done more quickly, with the understanding that an additional layer of approval with the federal government could once again be required. Giving adults $600 per person plus another $600 for a dependent child isn't much for workers who've been furloughed, unemployed, or seen shrunken paychecks for months. But it's something. The signing of a second pandemic relief also buys our unemployed residents some time. There will be 11 more weeks of unemployment benefits up to $300 a week. Instead of abruptly stopping this week, which was a possibility many dreaded when Donald Trump threatened he wouldn't sign the pandemic relief legislation into law. What the second batch of direct cash aid and the extended unemployment benefits allows is for Guamanians to be able to hang on for a little bit longer. They're Guam workers' second lifeline. But this federal assistance still doesn't give displaced workers a lot of hope for what lies beyond March. As the reality of our economy has shown, it's not likely thousands of jobs that have disappeared during the pandemic will be back in 3 months. Getting interim relief from the federal government is sorely needed and greatly appreciated. But the job of restoring local jobs rests in the hands of our local elected leaders. We hope they have foresight to know how and to tell us the straightforward way. Yeah, and I have an editorial that ran on the 22nd of December. It says local officials must prepare to flow new federal help funds quickly. I don't think they need to keep saying that. That is not the subject of an editorial. It's kind of like saying when people are hungry, they're looking for food. Give a thirsty man a drink of water. Things we'd never think about.
Go to print.
Yeah, if we hadn't read these editorials, we would never come up with these ideas in a million years. Okay, let's take a look at the card. And I start the card off by saying I have a memo called Common Sense Considerations. I'll start the card with one of these every day for a while. And this is what it looks like. Common sense considerations. It starts out like this. I wonder how many people would have been shot by police if they did not commit crimes or resist arrest. I suppose it would be none, except for the rare accident. Yeah, a really good way to not be shot by a police officer is don't commit crimes and don't resist arrest. I hope the editorial writers at the Post don't get a hold of this. There's about 2 out of 3 editorials in there somewhere.
You just gave them a whole month.
Yeah. Okay. I'll start the card as predicted. Dominion is suing Rudy and Sydney. In response to Jim M's call yesterday, I'll expound on anti-SLAPP laws. A little class on anti-SLAPP laws. Today is a day for lawsuits. I'll comment on the suit involving Twitter and Hunter Biden's laptop. And also Mike San Nicolas versus Rev Tax. And I've got some holdovers here. Our local social justice warriors, the white coats for Black Lives Matter folks, are educated again. And lefties used to be champions of free speech. Now they oppose it. And once again, English is a microaggression for the left. So let's start out with Dominion security chief sues Trump campaign and others for defamation. I spent some time on that yesterday. Eric Comer, who is the director of security for Dominion Voting Systems, has filed a defamation suit against Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, Newsmax, an outfit called One America News Network, the Gateway Pundit, columnist Michelle Malkin, and conservative activist Joseph Altman. But so far, Tall Tales, Robert Klitzkie, and Jose Martinez have not been mentioned. Let's see. He filed his suit in Denver County, Colorado, and he claims, for instance, Altman claimed that Coomer made anti-Trump comments on his Facebook. Coomer's lawsuit acknowledged that he did, but said it was a private Facebook account and it's now inactive. Coomer's lawyers say that their client has become the face of false claims. His name gained public attention in a podcast by Altman, during which he claimed to have heard an Antifa strategy call. When the prospect of a Trump victory was allegedly brought up during that call, Altman said a man identified as Eric from Dominion supposedly assured the rest of the call's participants, "Don't worry about the election. Trump is not going to win." I made sure of that. And the article talks a little bit more about, for instance, at a news conference, Giuliani called Coomer a vicious, vicious man. He wrote horrible things about the president. He's completely warped. So that's what we covered yesterday. And then I had a caller named Jim M. who said, yeah, well, this is a classic SLAPP lawsuit. SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. So if a person with a deep pocket is taking some heat in the public media, one of the tactics that can be used is to file a suit against people saying bad things. I'm about to say him, but I'm going to change it to them, right? About them. Because even if the lawsuit never hits pay dirt, it's expensive, it's time-consuming, and it tends to have a real chilling effect on those who would criticize people who are in the public light. And therefore, people become very cautious about criticizing people in the context of petitioning the government for redress of grievances. So if a person is petitioning the government for redress of grievances, that's one of the elements of bringing himself, bringing themselves within the ambit of the protection offered by the anti-SLAPP legislation. And the case was filed in Denver County, Colorado. When I was talking with Jim M. yesterday, we didn't know whether Colorado had enacted anti-SLAPP legislation. Well, I looked it up, and Colorado, who's just last year became the 31st state to enact anti-SLAPP legislation. So so I have our own anti-SLAPP legislation here, and we have a relatively famous or landmark case here called Guam Greyhound Inc. and James Baldwin versus Brazil. Now, this doesn't deal with foreign law. The Brazil is the person's name. And that case arose when Baldwin had had got the legislature to run a referendum dealing with casino gambling on Guam, which Baldwin was the proponent, and Brazil represented an organization that was against casino gambling. So when the lawsuit was over, Baldwin lost. It cost him big bucks. And it kind of sent a message to folks, don't be engaging in these anti-SLAPP, in these SLAPP-type suits. Now, I have our local SLAPP law in front of me here. It's at 7 GCA Chapter 17. Section 17104 is labeled immunity, and this is the immunity provided by our SLAPP law. Acts in further of the constitutional rights to petition, including seeking relief, influencing action, informing, communicating, and otherwise participating in the processes of government, shall be immune from liability regardless of intent or purpose, except were not aimed at procuring any governmental or electoral action, result, or outcome. So the key to the anti-SLAPP legislation door is that there must be some nexus to petitioning the government for a particular result or trying to influence electoral action. That's the kind of the foundation of the immunity. So when someone like Baldwin files a suit and the response is based on our anti-SLAPP law, this is what Section 17106 provides. A motion, as described in 17105, would be filed. And the chapter applies to any motion to dispose of a claim in a judicial proceeding on the grounds that the claim is based on, relates to, or is in response to any act of the moving party in furtherance of the moving party's rights, as described in 17104. And the motion shall be treated as a motion for summary judgment. Papers, affidavits, declarations, memoranda, no testimony. The trial court shall use a time period appropriate. The moving party shall have the right of expedited appeal from the trial court. Discovery shall be suspended pending decision on the merit motion and appeals. Now, this is important because the standard lawsuit starts out with a complaint that may be a little bit on the vague side. The plaintiff then can take depositions, serve interrogatories, request for admissions, request for production of documents, etc., and gather enough evidence that he can perhaps prove his case. And this can be very burdensome to the defendant and expensive. So if we're talking an anti-SLAPP motion, just no discovery. The motion is heard first. The responding party shall have the burden of proof of going forward with evidence and of persuasion on the motion. So the the person who has filed the SLAPP lawsuit has the burden of going forward and the burden of proof, and it's up to him to show that he has a possibility of obtaining a favorable result on his claim. And the court shall make its determination based on the facts contained in pleadings and affidavits filed. The court shall grant the motion and dismiss the judicial claim unless the responding party has produced clear and convincing evidence that the acts of the moving party are not immunized from liability by Section 17104. So the ordinary standard of proof in a civil case is preponderance of the evidence. Clear and convincing evidence is a higher standard. So if I were going to assign numbers to them, starting out with a criminal case, beyond a reasonable doubt, that's way up in the high 90s, maybe 99%, right? Preponderance of the evidence is just 51 versus 49. Clear and convincing, probably about 70. That's the way I would grade them. So the deck is really stacked against the person who is trying to silence a person's right to petition the government for redress of grievance by filing a lawsuit. So that's kind of a short course on how our SLAPP law works. I haven't looked it up, but I suspect that ours is copied from a model act and is probably very similar to the statute in the other 31 jurisdictions that have adopted such legislation. And that's why I thought I'd spend a little time on it. So given that Colorado has that anti-SLAPP legislation, and given that Powell seems to be quite imaginative, I would be very surprised if the defendants don't try to have Comer's lawsuit thrown out based on an anti-SLAPP motion. So if that happens, you won't be, like most everybody else, you won't be in the dark saying, what is a SLAPP? What is that? SLAPP? You'll be able to say, I know all about that because I'm a tailgater. So,
it's also known as a slapback.
Uh-huh.
What's interesting, I'm just looking this up, is Colorado just enacted or put into law their anti-SLAPP protections just last year, 2019.
That's right. That's right.
Poor Dominion.
Yeah. So I think maybe, now, of course, Dominion apparently has headquarters out of Denver. But, you know, if I were advising them, I'd say you might want to do a little forum shopping and go to a state that doesn't have SLAPP jurisdiction, anti-SLAPP provisions. But we'll just see how it comes out. In the meantime, I know a little bit about SLAPP, but there are so many things that I don't know about because, yeah, only the most dangerous man in the room has all of the tools necessary to read the secret codes. You know, these things like the code breaking the Japanese code in World War II, child's play for the most dangerous man in the room who can break any code, pick any lock. Tell us about Dominion, R. Carl.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob and Jose. I don't know if you saw Lynn Wood's response to the letter threatening a lawsuit. Did you see his brief response?
I did not.
It was really brief. I mean, it was just like maybe 3 or 4 sentences long, and he said, "I reviewed all your claims. I've thoroughly reviewed this." And Lynn Wood, I think that's his bread and butter, pretty much, dealing with defamation. So he said basically in just a few words, I've reviewed all your charges, behind this threatened lawsuit. His last sentence was pretty succinct. He said, file your lawsuit. He was not intimidated at all. So I really love that letter. That's great.
Yeah. Well,
but I was, I think you probably answered my question, but I'll ask it anyway. I was thinking that, that Dominion was basically, as you were saying, and I didn't know the term behind it, the SLAPP lawsuit, but I felt they were doing it to, the motivation behind it was to, I'm trying to grasp for the words, I lost my train of thought. They did it because they were trying to, as you were saying, discourage Sidney Powell, and gosh, I had a thought in mind and then it just slipped out of my grasp.
From filing suit, from going public.
Yeah, my thought was that they were that they wouldn't actually file a lawsuit, that they were basically just threatening to do it. As I in my mind, it was like they're kind of like rattling a saber, what looks like a saber, and when they draw it out, it's just a butter knife. And I was thinking, I'm not a lawyer. You can correct me and clarify if they filed, and you probably already answered this question. If they did file it, wouldn't that open them up to discovery and basically give Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell kind of a treasure trove that they could use?
Well, that's what I just covered in this anti-SLAPP legislation. If the defendants, Rudy and Sidney, decide to file the anti-SLAPP motion, then there would be no discovery until the disposition of the motion. And if they win the motion, then there would be no discovery. The only way there'd be discovery would be if they lose the motion.
Oh, okay. So what I seem to hear you saying is that Dominion is really at quite a disadvantage.
Well, of course, the anti-SLAPP protection comes for one who petitions the government. Now, I'm aware of a lot of the things that Sidney and Rudy have said, but I haven't really sat down and analyzed it and parsed it. Most of what they said is just Dominion is a bunch of crooks. They're a bunch of Venezuelan crooks. You can't be trusted. They've done so many bad things. Now, if they were couching their speech in something like this, the government has got to do something about Dominion. Every election in which Dominion was the voting machines, responsible government officials should take a hard look at them and throw out the results. But if all they're doing is just bad-mouthing and bashing Dominion, then perhaps they wouldn't be successful on their anti-SLAPP motion, because the motion is set up to protect people's right to petition the government for redress of grievances.
Oh, okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. I'm surprised with Lynn Wood's background in defamation lawsuits that he didn't state his case like what you were saying. I mean, they're both pretty blunt. I mean, they don't hold back anything.
Well, Lynn Wood was the guy that got the big settlement from CNN.
Yeah.
For the kids that were had the encounter with the Native American with a tom-tom, if you remember. I can never remember.
Covington High School kids.
Yeah, I can never remember the kid's name. But that's the one, yeah. And he apparently was able to get a very favorable settlement. He surfaced again as counsel for the Rittenhouse kid from Antioch, Illinois, dealing with the well-planned riot and demonstration in Kenosha. So he has a certain prominence, but he and Rudy are both pretty good at trying their cases in the media, which brings with it a certain amount of risk.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Anyway, Bob, thank you for allowing me to chime in. I appreciate it.
Okay, let's take a short. After that, after talking to the most dangerous man in the room, I need a short break.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Chili's has a dinner deal you can't miss. Enjoy a tasty appetizer, 2 bottomless Coca-Cola beverages, and 2 mouth-watering entrees, all for just $35. Treat yourself to entree options like our fall-off-the-bone baby back ribs, personal fajita with chicken, or the ultimate bacon burger. Chili's, 2 for $35. Available daily from 3 p.m. to closing for patio dining or takeout. Chili's is located on the 2nd floor of the Tuman Sands Plaza. Call 648-7377 to place your takeout order today. With Chili's, you can still savor the moment at home.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are. And the next item on the card is today is a day for lawsuits. I'll comment on the suit involving Twitter and Hunter Biden's laptop. Now, you all remember Hunter Biden's laptop, which is a veritable treasure trove of pornography, incriminating emails, salacious material, etc. And the laptop surfaced because it was turned into a computer repair shop run by a person whose name is Mac Isaac. Now, that's kind of a strange name. You know, Mac, a little bit of Scotland, and Isaac, a little bit of Israel put together, right? So it's Mac Isaac, like McDonald.
These must be busy holidays for him.
Really, yeah. So Mac Isaac had it, and whoever turned it in didn't come back to pick it up. Mac Isaac tried to get it back to its rightful owner. So then he decided he'd check out the hard drive and see what was on it, and he was amazed at the treasure trove of information he found there. He made a copy of the hard drive just for his own protection, contacted the FBI, and I think I could give you a quote of what the FBI agent who was assigned to the case told Mac Isaac after Mac Isaac told the FBI agent what was on the hard drive. It went something like this.
Right.
In other words, Mac Isaac was overcome by the indifference of the FBI agent to what was on that hard drive. So he gave it to Rudy Giuliani, and of course Rudy Giuliani knew what to do with it. The New York Post broke it and quoted some of the emails in there. You know, really bad news for Joe Biden. Some dots that you could connect that suggest that Joe Biden is in the pocket of the Chinese. ripping off large amounts of money from the Chinese through his son's bagman activity, more or less. But the Post ran it, and that was about the end of it. 5 days later, the New York Times came out with a story criticizing the New York Post for running the story. Leave it to the New York Times, right? And Facebook and Twitter blocked any coverage of it, and it just went nowhere. I saw a poll that a substantial number of people would not have voted for Biden had they known about Hunter's laptop. So a classic case of the media jumping in an extremely partisan manner to influence an election. So I have a story here from the New York Post, which is supposed to be the country's oldest newspaper. And if you compare the Post with the Times has got a great reputation, and they run a lot of really interesting stuff from all over. But they lost their soul. The Times has become, the New York Times has become the newsletter for the Democratic Party instead of a real newspaper. So here's a story written by Ebony Bowden in the New York Post. Computer repairman at center of Hunter Biden laptop scandal sues Twitter. Couldn't happen to nicer guys. A Delaware computer repairman who went public with the sordid contents of Hunter Biden's hard drive is now suing Twitter for defamation, claiming its content moderation unfairly branded him a, quote, hacker. Now, I guess that's a, if that's the business you're in, that's not what you want to be called as a hacker. It's kind of like calling a doctor a quack. Just the mere labeling of someone in the computer business as a hacker, pretty bad news. In October, the Post exclusively reported on the tranche of damaging documents on the laptop, which was left at John Paul McIsaac's repair store in April 2019, but never collected. The emails detailing Hunter Biden's shady overseas business dealings are now reportedly part of a federal tax probe into President-elect Joe Biden's scandal-scarred son. But social media giant Twitter immediately blocked users from sharing it online, claiming the reporting relied on hacked materials. Now, that's really a stretch if you understand the story. According to a report by The Verge published Monday, McIsaac is now suing Twitter for defamation, claiming the company decided to communicate to the world that McIsaac is a hacker. According to the report, Isaac said that his business received threats and negative reviews after Twitter's moderation, and he is now widely considered a hacker. He's demanding $500 million in damages and a public retraction from the company. According to McIsaac, the customer who brought in the MacBook Pro for repair in 2019 never paid for the service or retrieved it, or a hard drive on which its contents were stored. He was unable, after repeated attempts to contact the client. Before turning over the laptop to the FBI in December, McIsaac made a copy of the hard drive and later gave it to former Mayor Rudy Giuliani's lawyer, Robert Costello, a law partner of a lawyer named Bud Abbott.
Hey, Abbott.
What's the name of that firm, Jose?
Who?
Abbott and Costello. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, Abbott and Costello. Who's on first, right? Steve Bannon, former advisor to President Trump, told the Post about the existence of the hard drive in late September, and Giuliani provided the Post with a copy of it. Twitter founder Jack Dorsey was hauled before Congress in late October to explain their unprecedented censoring of the articles and Twitter's subsequent decision to lock the Post's account for 2 weeks.
Timeout.
Yeah, you can't put stuff on Twitter that's derogatory of the Democrat candidate. That's unconstitutional or something. A decision Dorsey later admitted was a mistake. Well, hello. The emails and text messages first reported by the Post detail some of Hunter Biden's business dealings in China and Ukraine and revealed how he sought to involve his father and profit off his high office. Federal investigators are now reportedly looking into whether Hunter and his business associates violated various tax and money laundering laws. In September, Republican senators released a report on Hunter's business affairs that said he and his family were involved in a vast financial network that connected them to foreign nationals and foreign governments across the globe. So McIsaac is suing Twitter, and I hope he wins. Not half as bad as I hope Twitter loses, because it couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of guys.
I concur.
Yeah. All right. Next item here. Who's suing whom today? Michael San Nicolas and his wife are suing the Department of Revenue and Taxation. Guam delegate Michael San Nicolas and his wife Catherine have sued the Department of Revenue and Taxation to dispute an alleged tax liability. Rev and Tax mailed a letter to the couple on October 1, notifying them of certain tax liability. The department calculated that San Nicolas alleged deficiencies due for their income taxes in calendar 2016 were $8,099, and penalties were $1,619, court papers state. RevTax asserted in part that dividends in the amount of $5,404 in tax year 2016 are taxable because taxpayers could not establish the amounts are excludable from gross income, according to the December 28 lawsuit filed by the petitioners through a law firm, Rosano, Walsh, and Torres. The couple claimed repairs and supplies in the amount of $18,450, but the department disallowed them as a deduction, according to RevTax assertion, as mentioned in the lawsuit. The department also questioned an amount claimed as repairs and supplies in the amount of $10,964. The couple stated in the lawsuit that they were issued a corrected statement on the dividends, that capital losses are explicitly allowed on the sale of a capital asset, and the $18,450 and necessary expenses for an income and producing process should have been allowed. The petitioners asked the district court to enter an order stating no additional liabilities, penalties are due. The court also asked to be awarded costs and attorney's fees. This was a little confusing because tax law is a little strange here in the territories. We have the Guam Territorial Income Tax, and the District Court of Guam has exclusive jurisdiction over tax collection matters, even though those matters would be prosecuted by the Attorney General of Guam. Collection of taxes is ordinarily civil. Evasion of taxes can become criminal. Now, as a general principle, there are two different ways that a taxpayer can contest the ruling of the Director of Revenue and Taxation. One alternative, pay the tax and sue for a refund. That doesn't appear to be what happened here. Now, there is a system of courts in the United States called the tax court, which everywhere else is not a local district court. There are 60 tax courts throughout the United States. And one who goes to tax court files his suit and challenges the ruling of the taxing authorities, and if he wins, that ruling is set aside. That looks like what Michael San Nicolas did here. Now, once again, here in the territories, things are a little different. Our district court, in addition to being a district court of Guam, is also the tax court for Guam. So it looks like Michael San Nicolas is petitioning to have the ruling of the Director of Revenue and Taxation overturned. Now, the story is a little bit ambiguous because it says the couple stated in the lawsuit that they were issued a corrected statement on dividends. Issued by whom? By the company that paid the dividends? By the Director of Revenue and Taxation? By the guy that hangs around out in front of the station? It doesn't really say. Anyhow, this is news, but it's not earth-shaking news. Michael San Nicolas, like everybody else, has to pay income tax, and from time to time would find himself in a position where he has to challenge the taxing authorities. So let's take a short break here, and we'll come back and finish up the first half.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations. Check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play, or go to thepoint.gu. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and Mezcla Dos are open for takeout and delivery services. More details, call the Hagåtña location at 479-2652 or Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon at 646-6295. Get your Mezcla fix at the comfort of your home.
Okay, so here we are, 7 more minutes till halftime. I've got an item here that was on the card before that I didn't get to. It's called Newsmax versus Fox. And this ran in a conservative email service, Red State. And the question is, what's going to happen to Fox News? After the election, it seems that conservatives and Republicans are gradually looking elsewhere for their news and commentary. Traffic to Tall Tales on the Point is increased dramatically. But it isn't just right-leaning consumers of content that are pivoting. The individuals who appear on these networks seem to be noticing the shift. The Hill recently reported that GOP lawmakers are appearing more frequently on Newsmax than they have in the past. Indeed, Fox News was virtually the only conservative news outlet on which Republican leaders appeared up until recently. As President Trump openly feuds with Fox News, conservative lawmakers and loyal Trump officials have increasingly added Newsmax to the rotation of media stops, giving a sheen of credibility to the fledgling network as it seeks to compete for conservative viewers. According to The Hill, Newsmax is not yet rivaling Fox in terms of ratings, but it seems feasible that the outlet could close the gap in the next few years. GOP lawmakers told The Hill that the rise in popularity for Newsmax and other right-leaning news organizations has enticed them to appear more frequently on these alternative networks. Representative Andy Harris, Republican from Maryland, stated that Trump's feud with Fox contributed to his decision to look at smaller outlets. The Hill noted, quote, asked whether Trump's criticism of Fox News is a factor for the small segment of Republicans considering the alternative networks, Harris replied, "Oh, it is for me." The same seems to hold true for other GOP lawmakers. Newsmax anchor Steve Spicer, who you recall was Trump's first chief spokesman, and his co-host Lindsey Keith recently interviewed newly elected representatives August Pfluger and Tony Gonzalez. Representative Jim Banks, Republican from Indiana, still appears on Fox, but has also made multiple appearances on Spicer's show. And there's some other list of some others that have made the switch. Still, Fox News remains the dominant right-leaning news outlet. It's the top-rated network in both daytime and prime time, just like Tall Tales as far as the Western Pacific is concerned. Still, Fox can book anyone it wants, including Trump, who sat for an interview with Fox and Friends last week despite his criticism of the network. Its popularity is declining in the wake of the election, but it still has ways to go before it's to worry about competition from the likes of Newsmax. But this does not mean it can afford to rest on its laurels. Newsmax seems to be doing everything it can to capitalize on conservatives' dissatisfaction with Fox. Reuters reported that the network plans to hire more staff in the United States and London, debut a new primetime host, and no, I don't care what they offer. I'm not going to do it. I feel for them. I'd like to help them out.
We're not letting you go.
Yeah, I'm happy right here at Tall Tales. They're going to try to capitalize on post-election gains and some viewers' discontent with Rupert Murdoch's longtime ratings king for Fox News. Maybe Rudolph, as you were, Rupert Murdoch's two sons, who seem to want to turn the tiller hard left. Fox News might be the outlet of choice for most current conservatives currently, but it's entirely possible that this is changing. The network's handling of the election left a sour taste in many Republicans' mouths. You remember they called, what state was it they called for?
I think Pennsylvania, Arizona was early.
They called Arizona, yeah, before anybody else, even before the lefty stations.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think we were the only ones that didn't call it, right?
We still haven't called it.
And we still haven't called it, yeah. While it's unlikely that Fox will fold completely, it appears to be inevitable that its competitors will grow more popular and could pose a serious challenge to the network's dominance. So, Newsmax. If you're streaming, you can pick up Newsmax, and I did a couple nights ago. And they've got a lot of programs, so I tried to tune in on their news program, and I got an error message: geographically not available, and that was true for most of their content. That I couldn't pick up Newsmax.
I'll hook you up, Bob.
I beg your pardon?
I'll hook you up.
Yeah, well, I mean, if my experience is correct, and I have no reason to think it's not, they're not going to be very popular if they can't appeal to this market.
True.
Let's break for that big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
One for the president, one against. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The House sides with President Trump and votes to increase stimulus checks to $2,000.
On this vote, the yeas are 275. The nays are 134.
But House lawmakers also voted against the president to override his veto of the defense spending and policy bill.
On this vote, the yeas are 322. The nays are 87.
Both measures move on to the Senate, where the fate of at least one of them is in question. The one for COVID relief.
Only 44 Republicans supported the president's plan, many worried about the price tag. This proposal costs $463 billion, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation. One Republican told me their anger is incandescent at the president tonight.
Fox's Chad Pergram. The increase on COVID relief may not even make it to the floor in the Senate, while the override on the defense bill is likely to get a Senate vote Wednesday. California is expected to extend its strict stay-at-home orders Tuesday for areas where hospitals are running out of ICU beds. This comes ahead of what's likely to be a post-holiday COVID surge.
With more virus cases expected to come in the next few weeks after Christmas and New Year's travelers return home.
Fox's Jeff Manasso. The coronavirus has killed more than 24,000 people in California and nearly 335,000 nationwide. And a record day on Wall Street all around, with the three major benchmark indexes closing at record highs after President Trump signed the spending bill this weekend, averting a government shutdown. The Dow rose 204 points to close at 30,403. The NASDAQ posting its 55th record close of the year. America's listening to Fox News.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
As we usher in the holiday season, we want to express our gratitude and appreciation for the lessons that have allowed us to navigate an unprecedented year. We recognize the impact the pandemic has brought to the world and express our condolences to those who have suffered. We are focused on family and what matters most as a community. Our team at Security Title is proud of the work we do. May this holiday season bring your family renewed hope. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from Security Title.
One big theory is flying around about why Anthony Warner blew up an RV in Nashville Christmas morning.
A number of reports traced back to an unnamed investigator who told ABC News that they're looking strongly into the possibility that the motive for the attack was something called 5G paranoia, that Anthony Quinn Warner was paranoid that the technology was being used to spy on people. 5G paranoia has manifested in a number of forms. Some theories say it causes cancer, spreads coronavirus, or has resulted in entire flocks of birds dying. None of these theories have ever vetted or proven true.
Fox's Mike Tobin. Investigators say the facts for now are that Warner's father worked for AT&T and the RV exploded in front of an AT&T building. An attorney for the Army Special Forces sergeant arrested for Saturday's deadly shooting at a bowling alley in Illinois says the sergeant suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. Rockford Police Chief Dan O'Shea tells reporters,
We believe this is a completely random act, and there is no prior meeting or any kind of relationship between the suspect and any of the victims.
Police arrested 37-year-old Duke Webb on 3 counts of murder and 3 of attempted murder. The Army says he was on leave at the time of the shooting. And the last Monday Night Football of the season turns into a one-sided game.
It was all Allen and Diggs in a Buffalo Bills blowout.
And it is, caught! That's Stephon Diggs!
Call courtesy of ESPN. Josh Allen finding Stephon Diggs for their 3rd touchdown connection of the night, helping Allen surpass Hall of Famer Jim Kelly for the most TD passes by a Bills QB in a single season with 34. Diggs would also break the franchise's single-season receiving yards record as the Bills clobber the New England Patriots 38-9. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
They're back. Any footlong is a $5 footlong when you buy one at regular price. At participating locations, Subway, eat fresh.
Coffee Day. I'm Chelsea Nicholas, and I'm the co-chair for this year's G is for Giving, as well as a proud alumna of the University of Guam. G is for Giving is an annual campaign that kicks off on the Tuesday following Thanksgiving and runs through the end of the year. Known as Giving Tuesday, it is an international day of giving, and this year's theme is Weaving Community. On Guam, we know a little something about weaving community, as we're all intertwined and interconnected in the spirit of Enough Malik. When one of us thrives, the island thrives. This is why I support G is for Giving's mission to support scholarships, programs, and research. As an alumna, I know how difficult it is to balance going to school and worrying about how you're going to pay for school. In these uncertain times, students are even more at risk because of economic hardship beyond their control. G is for Giving aims to bridge that gap and take away at least some of the burden. For more information on how you can give, visit give.uog.edu or call the UOG Endowment Foundation at 735-2957. Have a happy and safe holiday.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña and Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon are now open for takeout and delivery services. For more information, call now at 479-2652 or 3 or Mezcla Dos at 646-6295. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comfort of your own home. They take your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So another great halftime show here on Tall Tales. It doesn't get any better than the halftime shows that we put on every day. There's only perhaps one thing that even mounts any competition to our halftime shows. And in order to do those properly, we have to do them remotely because they have to be conducted in a drive-through facility at a restaurant like Wendy's or Burger King or McDonald's that has a drive-through facility. That's about the only thing that can compete with our halftime shows is drive-through Jack on location. So who's the server today, Jack?
Oh, Bob, I am still feasting on discount food and beverages.
Excuses.
Well, I was hoping that First of all, Merry Christmas.
Thank you,
And
Jack.
I would like to. I was hoping if you could tie this all in a nice bow. I've been listening to you since the start of this afternoon. Can you tie this into slap suits? Even the president threatening to veto the Defense Act because of the Section 230 decency clause. If you could tie this all together with the mainstream media, Hunter Biden's laptop, and I think you're aware that Project Veritas, James O'Keefe is on his 329th retraction that he has, that he has had from various platforms and publishers, and how this ties into Twitter and the shadow banning and the not allowing information to be published and stuff like that on platforms versus publishers, and how does that affect us out here in the territories? Because I know that we were in one of those lawsuits against Facebook, I think.
Well, yeah, our attorney general doesn't have time. Our attorney general is kind of like the Daily News. He doesn't have much time for anything that's happening locally. If he can chime in on something that's going on in the mainland and join one of these multitudes of suits that just require him to basically to send off a postcard and say, "Hey, count me in here too."
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's our attorney general. But
go ahead.
As far as the Section 230 is concerned, I think everyone understands that the Decency and Communications Act, probably not very well named, says that these platforms that allow citizen participation cannot be held for defamatory content being distributed over those platforms. So if I, for instance, were to post something on, you got to use your imagination here, Jack. If I were to post something on Facebook that said, "Drive-through Jack is a dirty skunk and an honorary pig stealer,"
you'll be batting 100 right now.
You if you wanted to sue, you'd have to sue me. You couldn't sue Facebook, okay? But you probably, rather than suing me, you'd probably come on there and say, "Give me a like," right, Jack?
Yeah. Plus, I probably considered it a compliment, depending on what company I'm keeping.
Well, I'd like to take credit for that phrase, but if you've ever seen the movie Oklahoma, which is a really great movie, there's a character in the movie called Judd Fry. You probably haven't seen it for a long time, but he's just.
Is it the same as the play Oklahoma that
Yes.
we high schoolers used to do back in the day?
The very same one. It goes all the way back to 1943. And Judd Fry is the villain. He's a very bad man, and he tries to do very bad things, and he's not very smart. So one of the songs is called "Poor Judd is Dead," and the Gordon McRae character says, folks used to call him a dirty skunk and an honorary pig stealer, and I like that phrase. I like that phrase so much that I've picked it up and I use it whenever I can, right up there with out-of-town Jasper in a pinchback suit. But anyhow, a long digression here, Jack. So that's the essence of Section 230, that those platforms can't be held liable for broadcasting defamatory content. One who is defamed by something that appears in Twitter has to sue the originator of the tweet, not Twitter itself, which sounds like a pretty good idea, because you want people to you want these things to be free and open, but they're not free and open, of course, because the folks who run those two outfits take it upon themselves to manage what goes through, and they're like the New York Times. They turn out to be just adjuncts of the Democrat Party.
Yeah, and plus they keep on switching up their terms and conditions. I mean, shaping it to like they are almost are publishers, in which that they can censor material, not even arbitrarily. I mean, they look at it and say, "Oh, this is good and this is bad. We're going to take this. We're not going to take that. We're going to slap warnings on this. We're going to slap false information on that." And that's what brings up the Project Veritas and James O'Keefe. He's on his 329th retraction there.
What does that mean, Jack? Explain that for us.
Yeah, so like either on a platform, he's done it against Twitter, or even against a news publishing place such as the New York Times. He's had retractions. In other words, he's had if a story was published and it wasn't, it wasn't true, and James O'Keefe filed off a letter to them saying, "Hey, I demand a retraction because what you stated on this article that you published or in your tweet is false." And he sends him the information and he sends him the correction like the next day or the next 3 days, whatever the platform or the publisher ends up printing a retraction that says, on certain day we said that this happened, that James O'Keefe, and Project Veritas, and they make the correction, whatever correction that has to be done. But James O'Keefe, he's not bashful of these things, and he has a YouTube channel in which he prints all the retractions, and he's up to 329, and he has a wall of shame from the Washington Post to the New York Times, Twitter, Facebook. He has all those major outlets out there.
I'll make you a bet, Jack. I'll bet you something you don't see on his wall of shame: tall tales.
Oh no. Yeah. So anyways, yeah. And that's what I've been saying. I think I mentioned retraction a while back with Miss Jane Flores when she published an article about a child in the womb. And I said, I'm still waiting a retraction somewhere that, they took Jane Flores' words out of context, because this is a lady that's out there searching for an abortionist. And to her, that's not a baby in the womb.
No.
That's a cell. So there must be a retraction somewhere, and still that was in February. So we're approaching the New Year's and there's still no retraction on that article. So I don't know what to take of it. I don't know whether she thinks the baby in the womb is a pound of flesh, or,
a potential granddaughter.
Yeah, it's her granddaughter.
I think she knows it's a baby in the womb. And that's the scary part.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Well, there's another angle. But yeah, and this is why I think there's a lot of this switch to other medias. And if you ever watched President Trump's rallies online live, it's covered by another media called Right News or something like that. And even during this past presidential debate, the lack of input about Hunter Biden's laptop, the dealings with Ukraine, and stuff like that, it just fell flat on its face. And even Chris Wallace, when he said that the Poor Boys, and they're not called the Poor Boys, they're called the Proud Boys, were a white extremist group. They're far right, but they're not white supremacy or white extremist group. They're the Pacific Northwest are made out of men of various colors. So even these things, if you don't get it right, even Snopes at times, I know they got bought out by somebody. They're not the Snopes of the original creator. They were bought out, and like the New York Times, like anything that goes big like this, they turn liberal. And so, it's an interesting time, and we'll see how it goes. And I had just one more question about the Powell thing, Sidney Powell.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a while back I heard you say that when a lawyer speaks in the defense of his or her client, that they're allowed a certain leeway in presenting things before the media that they cannot be sued for. Was I wrong to?
Well, I don't remember saying that. I can tell you something that's kind of close, okay? there's something called record libel. And it starts out like this. Papers filed in court are privileged. You can't sue somebody because of the papers he filed in court. He might be subject to discipline some other way, but a suit won't lie. So one who reports on papers filed in court and makes an accurate report can't be sued for defamation either, because it's a privilege called record libel. In other words, repeating that which is privileged. So if a lawyer were to stick strictly to the words that he put in his pleading, when he's talking to the press, he'd be in pretty good shape. It doesn't seem that most of the lawyers that we know nowadays do that. They seem to have a tendency to oversell their cases, and lawyers, like everybody else, can be sued for defamation, even if they're acting in their capacity of lawyers.
Okay, got that. Yeah, that sounds, yeah, that sounds exactly what you said, I think, before. Yeah, I probably was just cutting in and out and didn't.
Well, you're probably too busy ordering your supper, Jack. You weren't concentrating on what I was saying. You're concentrating more on talking to the girl who was filling your order. I'm sorry, the person who was filling your order. Trying to make sure you knew what they said.
Well, Bob, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. We're still in the Christmas season, so I wish you continue Merry Christmas until Three Kings. And so I'm gonna, as long as I call up, I'll be calling, wishing you Merry Christmas.
I appreciate
Merry Christmas, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Jack, and Merry Christmas to you. So there you have it, drive-through Jack. Not in a drive-through. Keeps coming up with this excuse that he stocked up his freezer and he doesn't have to go to the drive-through for supper anymore. I think he's just playing hard to get.
He tried to give you a tall order.
He did, a tall order. He must think I'm drive-through Bob or something like that. Okay, going on to the next item on the card here. This is the virus versus GovGuam employees. And this is a Lee Weber column from a couple weeks ago that I stored because it was kind of on the bottom of the card, but it didn't spoil. It's not like something like a can of fruit. When you open it, when you take the cover off it, it will spoil. It's still fresh. And this is what Lee Weber said. Maybe Guam should take a look at our bigger brother, Hawaii, where they have borrowed $750 million to cover their government payroll and then added an additional $250 million line of credit on top of that. Or the fact that Governor David Iggy has notified Hawaii government employees that they will face mandatory furloughs of 2 working days each month, or roughly 9 to 10% of their wages beginning in January 2021, due to the poor spending habits of that state. My guess is we'll be seeing more of the same in other states and territories as well when the free federal dollar supply begins to run dry. The reaction that this and other governments have had to Wuhan virus pandemic has literally destroyed previously vibrant private economies, while at the same time allowing far too many government employees to stay on payrolls while their offices and services were closed to the public. That said, my hat is off to the hardworking medical and public safety, fire, power, water, trash collection, talk show hosts, and other essential employees who have continued to work through this pandemic. They deserve our unending thanks. But what about the thousands of government workers who have not worked at their normal sites, but instead stayed home and continued to receive their paychecks? What are the results of that decision on the part of the governor? Could we too be facing a situation similar to Hawaii when federal funds run out and local revenues have been drastically reduced because of previously poor decision-making? One of the results of this decision-making is that tens of millions of dollars will be lost in driver and vehicle license renewals, not to mention all the delays that occur in the issuance of those licenses and registrations, plus the cost and man hours of those delays as well. Were these really non-essential functions of the government? If so, why do we then need them to return? Something I mentioned a little earlier myself. These folks are non-essential. Well, if cash is short, lay them off. What about our legislature? It disappeared for the first few weeks of the pandemic. You remember Doug Moylan had to shame them into session. And since that time has essentially functioned on a part-time basis. What about a permanent part-time legislature in the future? Or what about our children in schools? Dodea schools have managed to reopen successfully, but what has happened to our public school system and all the employees who continue to draw their normal wages? All this while at the same time closing literally thousands of businesses on Guam that had previously pumped money into the GovGuam coffers while simultaneously allowing specific so-called essential businesses to remain open. Can people not contract the virus in these so-called essential businesses? Cannot other smaller so-called non-essential businesses also comply with Wuhan virus rules of masks, hand washing, and distancing? Some stores are essential, but active portions of the government are not. Does that mean we do not need the massive volume of government that we currently have? Maybe it's the right time to reassess what is really needed in our government and purge the non-essential portions that have essentially remained inactive or worked on a part-time basis during this pandemic. At the very least, reduce their current size. Wuhan virus may well have been the justification this government needed to shut down certain sectors and turn others into part-time operations. Stay vigilant, folks. He says, well, that's a really good point. And as I just said, a point that I raised at the beginning of the program, we divided employees into essential and non-essential, and the non-essentials could stay home and draw their checks. We're getting to the point where we're not going to have enough money to make that government payroll every 2 weeks. Of course, we're not going to have money to do other things too, but the emphasis has always been, well, we got to make payroll. So when we get to the point where we can't do that, and we're going to start laying people off, how about the folks that got to stay home and got paid for staying home? Wouldn't that be symmetrical? Wouldn't it make sense? And I suppose folks have forgotten about it, but at the beginning of the 27th Guam legislature, when we were still recovering from September 11, 2001, the economy was in a slump, and the governor sent over a bill that reduced government employees to 36 hours per week. The legislature cut senators' pay from $55,000 down to $40,000. Legislation was enacted that allowed other government officials to voluntarily reduce their salaries by an equal amount. We had a relatively elaborate, generous system of subsidizing government of Guam retirees, regardless of the size of their annuity. That was chopped off for folks who were retired at over $40,000, and a sliding scale was built for others below that. It caused a lot of hate and discontent, but it's what happened the last time we had something like this. But that one wasn't anywhere near as severe as the shutdown that we have now. And we really haven't felt, because there's been so much federal dollars coursing through our economy. We're able to reach out with our nets and net some of it out and call it in the form of taxation. But given the rather, I don't want to use this word, cheapskate approach. I was going to say niggardly, niggardly, which means, ungenerous. But somebody used that word about a year ago in a city hall meeting, was fired as being a racist. So given the Republicans' lack of interest in providing large amounts of cash for local governments, we may be looking at something really, really tough, like layoffs, things like that. So if we have to do it, I agree with Lee Weber. I think that would be the way to do it. Okay, let's go to Wrigley Field for the 7th inning stretch. Jose.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Did you know your smartphone is one of the most powerful tools in our fight against COVID-19? That's why we're bringing you the Guam COVID Alert Exposure Notification app. Developed by Google, Apple, and the PathCheck Foundation, the app works by letting you know if you've been exposed to someone who's positive. It's completely voluntary, and more importantly, it's anonymous. Add your phone to the COVID fight. Go to guamcovidalert.guam.gov or download it from the App Store or Google Play now. Help Guam stop COVID-19.
Okay, so the 7th inning stretch coming to you from Wrigley Field, world's most beautiful ballpark, located in Chicago. So we take a speedy trip from Chicago right back here to the historic studios of The Point, located on Marine Corps Drive in Upper Tumum. And when I get back here, who's waiting for me in the green room? None other but Kellis. So, Kellis, what can you tell us today? Hi, Kellis.
Judge.
Sir.
I had to tell Joe that, I'm going to say it, that you're being a racist against GovGuam employees.
Oh, really?
That you're making disparaging remarks against, especially the ones that do not actually have to work. You have the GovGuam employees that are working hard. Like you said, the nurses, the doctors, the firemen, and all them. But, you have the other ones that, through no fault of their own, have not been able, and I can tell you they really want to work. They do not appreciate the paychecks that they've been receiving, even though they're not working. I mean, the employees that are not working, that are not receiving pay, they wish they could be more like them. But since they are GovGuam employees, which is the most important voting block of voters on Guam, they have to be kept well paid.
And I
wish to be a GovGuam employee.
And I shouldn't say unkind things about them, right, Kellis?
Yes. I mean, I'm ashamed to be listening to you right now when I'm hearing these hard, not working GovGuam employees that, through, again, no fault of their own, that are receiving pay. Do you realize the shame that they're going through when they're going to Ross and whatnot, and they're buying all their food? And so there are other people that were calling up, and I think I should talk about them also. That the senators wanted to give all, even GovGuam employees, the $800, because then they would be more like everyone else. By not giving them $800 for not working, you would be, making fun of them, and that'd just be unfair. So they should receive this COVID relief $800 check as everyone else.
I'll have to admit, Kellis, you bring a different perspective to the question, one that I'd overlooked. So I'm going to fess up. Okay, are you ready for this?
Yes, I am.
My bad.
There. And you know what? And even Lee, how dare he talk about? If anything, I think we need more GovGuam employees. So, in other words, if GovGuam were just to hire everyone that is out of work and give them retro pay, I think that would be fair.
Yeah, well, they'd have more money to spend, and the economy would start spending again, wouldn't it?
Yes. See, that's what I'm saying. So we just have to probably get, if GovGuam could get like $1 or $2 billion to pay all the food and beverage people and all these people, and GovGuam would basically own all the hotels.
Well, that's what government's for, right, Gillis?
Yes, it is. I just thought I had to, I'm sorry, Judge, but I had to, do that.
Well, I'm glad you called me out, Kellis. You really put me in my place.
Have a good day, Judge.
Thanks for calling. Yeah, Kellis, well, he really lays it out, doesn't he? No mercy.
That was a knockout.
Yeah. All right, so the next on the card here is Black Lives Matter versus white coats for Black Lives Matter. And this goes back to not long after the death of George Floyd. You notice I did not say the murder of George Floyd, because I've seen enough evidence to convince me that George Floyd died of an overdose of fentanyl, which caused a heart attack.
And I think the what was the guy's name? The coroner.
Yeah.
Had the same opinion.
Said the same thing. Yeah. So the fact that a police officer put his knee on George Floyd's neck, I've seen training papers from the Minneapolis Police Department. That is the recommended way to deal with people who become overexcited because they're arrested. So they're to be immobilized like that until medical support can arrive. So it was the death of George Floyd that kicked this whole thing off. It resulted in looting, arson, rioting, etc. And we weren't left out, because on Guam we didn't do the looting, riot, and arson, but we did engage in some really heavy-duty virtue signaling. And the virtue signaling was done by a group called White Coats for Black Lives Matter. And they put on such a nice show. They were down at Skinner Plaza with their white coats on, keeping appropriate social distance from one another, took up quite an area down there, and they kneeled for 8 minutes and 42 seconds or something like that in support of Black Lives Matter. It was very touching.
It was the least they could do.
It was the least they could do. Well, maybe at the time it happened, maybe it was understandable. But now that we know what Black Lives Matter is, I would think that the folks that organize that thing, one of whom is the governor's daughter, and the other one is Thomas Shea, who is in the media all the time, ought to come out and say, yeah, we did that, but now we know better. And we don't want to be identified as supporting that group of, actually what they are, Marxists. So if they need more education, I've got a paper here that I get from a website called LouRockwell.com. Very, very, very good, conservative, moving towards libertarian. And the title of this paper is, "This is a Marxist Revolution." In our recent posts, we've tried to show that the upheaval that is presently convulsing this country is in reality a neo-Marxist revolution in progress. Despite the many obvious signs, most people in this country are still oblivious to this, like white coats for Black Lives Matter. Not only do they not recognize that this is an attempted revolution, the idea that it could be Marxist one seems completely implausible. Most Americans think of Marxism as some bugaboo that is periodically brought up by wild-eyed alarmists who see a Bolshevik underneath every protest banner. They believe that this ideology has long been discredited and that no one in their right mind would take it up as a viable way of looking at the world. In this, they are only half correct. Even though it's true that history has shown Marxism to be dead wrong, Marxism is far from being dead as a worldview. Quite to the contrary, it is very much alive. It shapes directly or indirectly the worldview of many in the American intelligentsia, many of whom hold important posts at universities, in the media, and in government. To be sure, most of these individuals do not openly present themselves as traditional Marxists. Many of them, in fact, even concede that classical Marxism is flawed, having failed to deliver on its promises and predictions. This attitude gives these ideological mutants an air of seeming reasonableness and objectivity, but they will not let go of Marx's basic assumptions. Having retained Marx's core insights, they modify his theories on the edges or develop them in new directions. As a result, in the last 80 years, we have witnessed a proliferation of philosophies and theoretical systems derived from Marxist teachings. Here's a partial list: critical race theory, Frankfurt School, liberation theology, critical theory, black theology, Maoism, the Praxis School, and I've got a long list here. But I'm getting up to the point where we're close to the home stretch, and I want to accommodate another Joe here before we break for the home stretch. So I may have to come back to this article tomorrow. I think it's really important, and I don't want to shortchange it. So another Joe, what can you tell me about GovGuam's public sector?
Oh man, I'm really sorry. I interrupted your educational lesson there. I'll try to make it fast. So it just seems like people are. It's like they initially they joke about GovGuam workers versus the private sector, and all in good fun. But some people take it further, and the irony or the irritation is that we're on an island in the middle of the Western Pacific Ocean, and we are in the same boat together. We have to depend on each other, but it doesn't seem like that's the case with regards to the administration and the Democrat Party, and unfortunately because of their leadership, the government workers. But I wouldn't blame them in particular. It's the leadership. The buck has to stop with the leadership of Kebab. And I think what has to happen is they need to change their course, the leadership. Everyone has to be more inclusive. They have to include more Republicans. They have a bipartisan effort, and they need to make good use of these GovGuam workers. If they're going to be at home sitting on their butts, give them some homework to do. Give them some projects. Get them involved in some kind of community effort, whatever they can figure out, have them do. Because if they're going to get paid, they should be doing something. Although, of course, there's called a job description, so I'm not sure how they'll deal with. I mean, how able they will be to reassign GovGuam workers to tasks if it's not part of the job description. But having said that, I think it's just, putting them to good use. I think you give them a choice. You have a dialogue. Say, hey, would you prefer to take leave without, or be put on leave without pay, or would you prefer to be put to a task, an assignment, and get paid because you're doing work other than what you initially were hired to do, or within the usual work environment. I don't know if I'm in the right general area, Bob.
I think you are, but let me jump in here for a second. You're absolutely right, but there's this mindset that's been in place for so long that someone who would attempt to do something like you're talking about would run into a lot of resistance, because there is this attitude, Gov Guam doesn't do that. As an example, on the day before the last day of work, before Christmas, you walk around and every department is having a party that afternoon. Just like the mayor of Jigo wasn't even open on the day before Christmas. Well, that's the way Gov Guam does it. So if the leadership were to say, because of the Wuhan virus, you folks aren't going to be able to report to your regular websites, regular work sites, this is what we want you to do. Everybody knows that when there's a typhoon or any other kind of emergency, Gov Guam doesn't work. And then everybody also knows that those who actually have to go in and work are entitled to double pay. That's what all of that hullabaloo was about. So to her credit, the governor said, no, we're not going to do that this time around. But that's the kind of opposition that a person is going to run into if he tries to make good use of that labor force. So another Joe, did I answer your question?
For the most part, they could go up real quick. They could assign everyone to do office work for Delegate Mr. Nicholas, and have them seek more water operations, and also more money from the federal government for the COFA citizens. Thanks for your time, Bob, and I'll just keep listening.
Okay, thank you, another Joe. So that's another Joe, and I'm just about to start the home stretch. I got Tim Rohr on the line here. I'm going to pick him up just before the home stretch. Good afternoon, Tim. Hello? He's gone.
Looks like it just dropped. Here we go.
Okay. Good afternoon, Tim.
Hey, Bob. I just wanted to sneak this in. I know it's not on the card, but today is the feast day of St. Thomas Becket. And Becket was hacked to death in the Canterbury Cathedral. He was the Archbishop of Canterbury in the year 1170. And there was an article in the Telegraph, UK Telegraph today, about how Becket, more than any other non-royal, is I guess more written about than any other non-royal of the Middle Ages.
I'll tell you what, Tim. Even though you're not on the card, I'll give you a special dispensation, and I'll pick you up at Churchill Downs, and we'll ride down the home stretch with Thomas Becket. Okay?
Okay. I kind of lost connection there, so I didn't know where I was, but I'll hang on, or whatever you need to do to get me back on.
Hang on.
Okay.
Rolling sound, quiet, and action.
The Ray Gibson Show, starring Senator Mona Silva Tyron as the news anchor.
I'm Mona Silva Tyron, and I'll have your local news every morning. Life moves pretty fast, so stay with us to stay informed right here on The Point.
Also starring Jerry Roberts as the Better Business Training Guru.
Get out there and do something good today, like listen to us Monday through Friday, 6 to 10 a.m., where we go extra for you.
Produced by the real Joe Cruz. And your warm and intelligent host, Ray Gibson.
It's the Gibson Stream of Consciousness. All the players and all the games with cameos and calls from the most interesting people like you. We'll see and hear you right here on your talk radio superstation. This is The Point.
The Ray Gibson Show was filmed before a live Facebook audience.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm sitting up on the stands watching the jockeys herd their horses into the starting gate. And who do I stumble across here in the stands in Churchill Downs but Tim Rohr?
Thanks.
Welcome to Kentucky, Tim.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Anyway, just real quickly, so today, December 29th, is the feast day of Thomas Becket. It's interesting that the church, right after Christmas, has very heavy-duty martyrs. The very day after Christmas is the feast of Saint Stephen. On the feast of Stephen, the first martyr that we read about in the Acts of the Apostles. 2 days later is the slaughter of the innocents that Herod slaughtered, and then the very following day is Thomas Becket. And what caught my eye, Thomas Becket is probably one of the more famous saints. I'm not sure it's because of Richard Burton's portrayal of him in a very famous movie, or there actually really is something to Thomas Becket. But Becket was slaughtered, actually hacked to death in his own cathedral by Henry II's knights in the year 1170, because Becket basically told Henry where to shove it when Henry, the government, i.e. the government, tried to intrude on church business, tried to tell the church what to do. And if there was ever, I mean, this is what 600 years before our founding fathers wrote, Congress shall make no law. And Becket stood up to Henry II and said, the king shall make no law. So given that we're on the very cusp of, abolishing the First Amendment, and that there's religious persecution happening like never before, and given the advent of what could be an administration that's absolutely hostile to religion, especially the Catholic Church, you'd think that we would hear from the Pope, from the cardinals, from the bishops, from the priests, celebrating this feast day, but not a word. If you go to Google and you look up Thomas Becket and you use the tools to find out what was said about him this week, the only thing out there is this. On the Hill.com, headlines: Trump calls for end to religious persecution worldwide on 850th anniversary of Thomas Becket's death. President Trump, is trumpeting a Catholic saint, and we don't hear anything. There's nothing there from our own church, my Catholic Church, about who Thomas Becket is and why he's important at this particular time. But President Trump is calling, worldwide attention to religious persecution. And actually, if you go to the White House website, there's a proclamation there from the president honoring Thomas Becket and his contribution to religious liberty. So there's something we should probably look up anyway. Just look it up and read it and see what's really going on here, because we certainly aren't going to hear it from our church.
Very interesting, Tim. And it's good to hear that our president at least recognizes that kind of heroism in respect to the free exercise of religion. It's becoming sort of a unusual thing to find people in public life that recognize the importance of free exercise of religion.
It truly is the only thing on the internet right now about Thomas Becket of any consequence, and it's coming from President Trump and not from Vatican City. It really says something right there. We have the Vatican telling us to get vaccinated and to obey the government and to all that kind of stuff. And of course, we just went through all this lockdown stuff and not being able to go to mass for how many months because we couldn't stand up to the modern day equivalent of Henry II. And here we have a saint, Thomas Becket, who was the first, really, in history to do such a thing. And we have a president that everybody wants to run out of town, who's the only one standing up and reminding us of what liberty really is all about, and it begins with religious rights, a freedom to worship as we want. That's what America is all about from the very beginning. So, anyway, just thought I'd throw that in there and let you get back to the card.
Well, I really appreciate that, Tim. That's a very. I could have put it on the card as Thomas Becket versus Henry II, right?
It's not too late. You can extend it till tomorrow if you want to talk more about it. It's fascinating. Given Trump's proclamation, it's really fascinating. So
yeah,
there'd be a possibility of doing that. But, yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing, Tim.
You bet.
Okay, so that takes us down to about 5 more minutes till the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow here on Tall Tales. I could go back to the lesson that I was trying to lay out for the White Coats for Black Lives Matter, but I think I'll hang on to that until tomorrow.
Can I confirm something really quick?
Well, you may.
There was a caller who asked for a citation that you used talking about vaccines and aborted fetal stem cells. That was LifeSite News.
Yes.
December 11th, and that's which COVID-19 vaccines are connected to abortion? Something like that.
Probably something
okay.
like
But
that.
December
yeah.
11th is the month.
Yes,
the date.
yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right. Very good.
Okay.
That's posted on the chat.
Okay. I'm just going to take a look through the chat here and kill a little time till it's time to go home. See who's here. Well, we've got Lynn McAfee, who's a regular tailgater. And Pam Duvall chimes in with Buenas, Judge, and Jose. And let's see. I've got Sherry Iriarte. Good afternoon, Judge Bob, Jose, and the international radio listeners. And Troy Torres, the very Troy Torres, who's
the one and only,
who is a muckraker. And I've explained that before. That is a complimentary title. If you remember your American history, around the turn of the last century, there were a group of people that would expose that which needed to be exposed. And they were called muckrakers. And that's exactly what Troy does. He exposes things that others are not willing to expose, perhaps more interested in their personal comfort than they are in exposing that which needs to be exposed. And let's see, who else have I got here? I've got Raul Montez, who says, half a die. Apparently something of a British approach to tall tales. Brad Wood is here. Nate jumps in and blows his horn about a virtual private network. I understand what Nate and Pierre are saying, that, I could pick up Newsmax if I had a virtual private network. Interesting, but the point that I want to make on all of this is Fox News needs to have some competition. And the necessity of hooking up to a private network in order to compete with, in order to get an alternative conservative TV station, going to work out pretty well for Fox News, I'm afraid. We've got, Nate horned in along with Pierre. And then we get to the gray area. And a message emanates from the gray area, not liberal, leftist. I don't remember what I was talking about when the word liberal came up. The Democrats used to call themselves liberals, but they made such a mess of the word that they had to drop it. Now they call themselves progressives. Liberal used to be a really good word. When you talk about a classical liberal, that's what I'd like to be. Free speech, freedom, government not in your business, etc. But when the Democrats hijacked it, like they hijacked so many things, they really tainted the word to the point where I would rather be called a dirty skunk and an honorary pig stealer than a liberal. So that's from the gray area. No black, no white, just varying shades of gray from Walter. And then Dennis. Dennis has a very effective technique of using winning arguments. It's called mace. Actually, he's called mace. And he says One American News is another right-leaning channel.
Lots of people refer to it as OAN.
Yeah, OAN, right-leaning channel that carried Trump campaigns. And I got Rico Blancaflor, and I'm hearing Ravel's Bolero in the background, so I got to go. But I'll be back tomorrow on Wednesday for another terrific episode of Tall Tales. See you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The House votes yes. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The House votes to increase stimulus checks to $2,000 in a strange concurrence of Democrats supporting President Trump, who demanded the increase.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer is asking President Trump to help get this done.
I am telling Donald Trump, don't just talk about it, act. These Senate Republicans have followed you through thick and thin.